Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game preview for Boise State versus Oregon. I cannot believe that I finally get to say that. We were obviously very excited about the season opener versus Georgia Southern, and it was definitely an exciting game to watch. But this has been the circled matchup. Obviously, marquee, Power 4 team, Oregon, a team Boise State has a history with. We'll go into that in this video. But this, of course, has been the matchup that Boise State fans have been focused on all offseason since it has been scheduled. And coming into this week, this is probably the most excited the fan base will be all season for a game. This is a huge opportunity for Boise State to make a major statement. Now, can they go and do that? Can they get a win versus a top 10 program? We don't know where they're going to end up in the rankings. I'm doing this video on Sunday, so the rankings won't come out until Tuesday after the Florida State versus Boston College game. So we don't know where they end up in the rankings, but we assume still top 10, top 15. So this is a big chance for Boise State to go out and get a win. Can they do that? They've done it before. Can they do it again? We're going to talk about that in this video. We're going to preview the matchup. We're going to talk about where this game is being played, where fans can watch it, when they can watch it, all those, the betting odds, all of that. We'll talk about the series history, as I've already hinted to, between these two programs. We'll talk about key players with Boise State and Oregon. So, hey, Oregon fans, if there are any watching out there, there's stuff in this video for you as well. And then we'll get into the keys to the game for Boise State, as well as a summary and a score prediction. So, you all know the drill. Before we go any further, every single one of you, Boise State, Oregon fans alike, you're all welcome to participate. Pause the video and give me your score predictions. Just like last week, whoever is closest to the final score prediction, I will give them a shout out in my review video. But this is going to be a very, very exciting game. I know that both fan bases are looking forward to this one, so I'm excited to see what your score predictions are. And also, hey, if you have any other thoughts, put those in as well. But put those score predictions in, and the closest one I will give a shout out to in my review video as well. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Let's get into previewing this matchup. So Boise State and Oregon, both 1-0 coming into this. Currently, Oregon ranked number 3, because again, I'm doing this video on Sunday. But again, probably going to end up somewhere in that 10 to 15. And the reason for that is because while Oregon is 1-0, they did not win as they should have in Week 1, playing an FCS opponent, one that should be somewhat familiar to those from the great state of Idaho. They played Idaho, and Oregon won that game 24-14. Definitely a lot closer of a heart-throbbing game for Oregon fans than they were anticipating in that matchup, than anybody was anticipating that matchup. I was seeing score predictions of 70-7, and I think most people were thinking it was going to be somewhere along those lines. It was not. Idaho was in this game pretty much right to the end. So this was a game that all the way through was a really tight contest. Oregon was not able to rest their stars like they thought they would, and it has put a lot more pressure and eyes on this Boise State game that might otherwise not have been. For Boise State, on the other hand, theirs was a close game as well, but not the defensive matchup that the Oregon versus Idaho game was. Theirs was a shootout, 56-45 versus Georgia Southern. Boise State able to pull away in the end after giving up a lead and actually going behind for a little bit before being able to pull away with a win. So neither of these programs not necessarily living up to expectations in Week 1. Definitely major questions for both sides. I am looking forward to previewing this video. I'm also looking forward to talking with Oregon fans about this matchup, and I am going to be able to talk with one of them this week, actually on Wednesday. I'm going to be talking with Sports Chat 503, going on his channel, getting his perspective on this matchup, and he'll also be getting the Boise State side as well. I'm excited to have that discussion, so make sure you guys go and follow his channel. He's been doing it for a long time, 15 years of doing this on YouTube. That's a really long time for anybody out there in the YouTube game to be analyzing their teams. So make sure you go and you support his channel, and look forward to that preview on Wednesday. But now let's get back into this preview. This is a game that's at 8 p.m. Mountain Time on Peacock. Oregon, a heavy favorite, though that heavy favorite level is dropping a little bit. They open as 20-point favorites. At the time of this video, they have reduced to 18.5. People are starting to buy into Boise. They're putting some bets down on Boise. So Boise State's starting to get a little bit of some support there. That I expect that number to continue to drop a little bit, but probably stay in the 15 to 17 point range. But as of right now, 18.5 point favorites, and heavy favorites per ESPN as well, 79.9% favorite. However, looking at the series history, we've heard, not necessarily those exact numbers, but we've heard the favorite numbers before, where Boise State was not favored to win. And Boise State has won every single time. They are yet to lose to Oregon. 3-0 in that matchup. It's a number of Boise State fans we love to throw around, and Oregon fans are very sick of hearing it. So the Oregon fans, and I'm sure the team is very motivated to come and try and get the monkey off their back on this one and finally get a win versus Boise State. Not something they've been able to do in the past. But 3-0, started in 2008. Boise State rolled into Oregon. Not a lot of expectations for that Boise team. That Oregon team was a top 25 team at number 17. And Boise State shocked them and the world, announced the presence of Kellen Moore. It was his first away game as a starter, and Boise State won that game 37-32. Then in 2009, Oregon paid a visit back to the Blue, and they ended up losing that game 19-8. Again, that a little bit more of a defensive matchup. Boise State winning that game, and then in 2017, playing in the bowl game this time in the Vegas Bowl, a 38-28 point win for Boise State. And again, I'm not sure about the 2009. I think Boise State might actually have been favored in that, but 2008 and 2017, they were not favored to win those games, and both of them they managed to. So is this another chance where they could come in and beat the favored team? Well, if they are, it's going to come down to the number one key player for this matchup in Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty had a dominant performance in week one, and dominant isn't even the right word. I'm not sure that the English language contains the words necessary to describe the performance Ashton Jeanty had in week one. 267 yards rushing on just 20 carries. He averaged 13.4 yards average per run. He had 2 70-plus yard touchdown runs and 6 touchdowns overall. He was an absolute beast. We all knew that he was going to be that this season. Obviously, we have the hashtag Heisman with the 2 campaign for Ashton Jeanty. We're all incredibly excited about his potential, but to open up that season already in mid-season form and to have a career performance, a performance that has eclipsed record books for Boise State, both in touchdowns and in total yardage overall, was absolutely amazing. And he's going to need to have not necessarily another career day, though that would be great, but he's going to need to have a big day versus Oregon if Boise State's going to have a chance to be able to come in and upset the Ducks on their home turf. Now, because he's not the only player on this roster, and because Oregon is going to be focused in on stopping that run game, you're going to have other people step up. And one of those guys that I think is going to need to have a big game, especially if the passing game becomes a point of emphasis, as I think it will have to, is going to be Cam Camper. He led the team in receiving last game, and again, that was a little bit of a mistake. Not a mistake necessarily that I made, a mistake that ESPN made. They didn't update their graphics by the time I came out with my review video, and so they had Cam Camper as the second overall receiver for Boise State, but he actually was the number one, so they updated it after the game, but video was already out at that point. So 4 receptions for 99 yards along at 53. The Rutgers transfer coming to Boise. He has found a special connection with Maddox Madsen. Maddox Madsen, when he is in a bind, when he's got to come back from an interception, when he's got to find someone for a 2-point conversion, for a key first down, he's going to Cam Camper. Cam Camper has a very much Austin Pettis vibe about him, which should excite a lot of Boise State fans. I think that he is going to need to have a big game. Receiving core overall is going to need to have a big game in this one, but Cam Camper, a player that I think he has the size, the athleticism, the hands, and apparently the connection with the quarterback to go out there and have a big performance. And then another player who has the potential to step up and have a big game is Matt Lauder. 2 receptions, 13 yards. Not a huge game last week. Much more of an emphasis in the running game, where he did a great job of blocking for Boise State. Big role in helping get to those 6 touchdowns for Ashton Jeanty. But I think that he is a threat, a playmaker that Boise State will need to target, get the tight ends involved. Matt Lauder is going to be a key focus point, I think, for Boise State to have a big game and get that win in this one. Now, rolling over to Oregon. Oregon has a very dangerous roster top to bottom. Even if it was a disappointing start to their season, they still have a lot of talent, and it starts with Dillon Gabriel, a name that Boise State fans should be familiar with, because obviously he was the quarterback of UCF when Boise State went down in 2021 and lost a very narrow game to UCF on their home turf. So Dillon Gabriel actually had a really good game overall stats-wise. 41 of 49, only incomplete on 8 passes, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, he only averaged 7.8 yard average per pass. It was a lot of kind of shorter stuff, but he had a really, really good game. In fact, it's incredible that he almost threw for 400 yards and yet only had 2 touchdowns. So a lot of bend but don't break for Idaho there. But he had a big game versus Boise last time they played as well, over 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Also a big threat on the run. Wasn't so much of a threat versus Idaho. It actually had negative yardage, was sacked 3 times, so that speaks well for Boise State, and we're going to talk about that for the keys to the game. But this is a guy that he's got an arm, he's got good legs, Boise State has felt those before, and he is going to I'm not going to say need to have a big game, because I don't think the point of emphasis is on Oregon needing to do things. It's on Boise State needing to step up to win this one. But I think he has the potential to have a very big game against a Boise State secondary that struggled, and a Boise State defense that struggled to stop the run overall. There's two things that scare me the most about this game. It's Dillon Gabriel's arm versus our secondary that looked very vulnerable versus Georgia Southern, and his legs versus our defense overall, which he hurt us before, but also because we couldn't stop French, who isn't even a primary running quarterback. Dillon Gabriel, much more productive in the run game overall. Obviously not last week, but overall, much more productive in the run game, and he is going to be a scary threat versus this Boise State defense if they cannot stop him in either of those categories. Now, when he does go to the air, he's going to be looking at wide receiver Tez Johnson. Now, this is not, huge 6-foot+ tall wide receiver. He's only 5'10", but he's speedy, he's quick, he runs good routes, and he's got great hands, and he is a primary target for Dillon Gabriel. He led by far all receivers in total receptions, not receiving yards, but total receptions, with 12 receptions for 81 yards, and also had both of those touchdowns from Dillon Gabriel. This is a guy that Dillon Gabriel is focusing on looking to as a primary target when things start to break down. They had a fourth down conversion for a touchdown to Dillon Gabriel to Tez Johnson. So this is a playmaker for Oregon that Boise State is going to need to try and find a way to stop. I don't know if they can. And just to make it clear, he is not the only one. Oregon, even though nobody else had any touchdowns for them, they had a lot of guys that were making big catches top to bottom. They really spread the ball out. They have a lot of receivers and running backs that can catch the ball in this offense. They're a very, very dangerous passing attack. And talking about one of those running backs, Jordan James, 15 carries, 95 yards, a touchdown, 4 receptions for 40 yards. Is it Ashton Jeanty numbers? No, but he's also very, very productive. Clearly a key playmaker in this offense, and dangerous in both the run and catching for Oregon. All right, so keys to the game for Boise State. Number one key is going to be bring the blitz. We've talked about the secondary and the struggles against this defense, and Boise State secondary, they struggled last year, and they're still continuing to struggle. What we saw last season when Boise State blitzed, when they actually put pressure on the quarterback and the secondary was not having to stay out there on islands because the 3- and 4-man rushes are not getting through for Boise State. When they weren't having to stay out there on islands for 4+ seconds, they were actually playing pretty well. But when you start clicking past that 4-second mark, players are open somewhere on the field. And this secondary as well seems to be really struggling to gel after a lot of players being put into new positions. Again, it could just be first game jitters, first game rust, and again, new playmakers having to find their way into new positions. Like I said last video, Ty Bensfield starting at safety. Rodney Robinson moved from safety to nickel. You've got Myron McCoy starting at corner when he wasn't the primary starter last year for the at least for the beginning of the season there. Irby and Banks, power forward transfers coming into Boise State and having major roles. Zion Washington having a bigger role. He had a great game. But overall, you got a lot of different playmakers moved into different positions or taking more or larger primary roles that they didn't have last season. And so maybe it's gelling. But overall, Boise State's secondary is still struggling. And what Boise State seemed to do in the second half, towards the end of that game when they were able to come back, is they started applying that pressure more consistently. And that is when Boise State was able to start making stops. When, even if there was a wide open receiver, if French didn't have time to get to him, that is when Boise State was able to make stops in the secondary. And so for Boise State, looking at this Oregon team, they're actually quite vulnerable on the offensive line. This Oregon offensive line is not intimidating. You're watching that Idaho tape. The Idaho guys, they're sending a lot of blitzes, but they are getting through more times than they are not versus Dillon Gabriel. Again, 3 sacks, and that is versus a FCS opponent. 3 sacks, Idaho being able to get in versus Oregon. The Oregon line looked very, very porous. Boise State's defensive line, I think, is a strength for them. They're just not able to consistently get there. When they're just bringing the 3 or 4-man fronts. But that Boise State defensive line combined with their linebackers, that front 7 for Boise State, is a real strength of this team. Marco Navarani, Simpson, Rip, all of those guys are real strengths for this Boise State defense. And if you can send an extra body against Dillon Gabriel, who again, threat to run, way to be able to stop him from being able to do that is again sending those blitz packages after him. If Boise State can bring the blitz in this game and make it a consistent point of emphasis, You're not going to be able to stop them with 3 or 4 man rushes. Just get that out of your head altogether. Limit the time that the secondary has to have to stay on islands versus this very, very, very dangerous Oregon passing attack. Force Dylan Gabriel to make mistakes and force him into second and long, third and long type situations where you get more breathing room. That is going to be a major key emphasis for Boise State. They have got... It seems simple. This was actually a key for the Washington game. I think this was the number one key for the Washington game. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed from last season. And that sucks because we wanted this Boise State defense to be better. But overall, schematically, nothing has changed. When Boise State blitzes, the secondary performs better. You would love to be able to get through on a 3 or 4 man blitz. That's not the case. We don't have a secondary that can step up. This isn't the Boise State secondaries from those 2008, 2009, even 2017 seasons. This is not the same defense from the past for Boise State that has been dominant and has been a major strength. This is still a Boise State defense that is working through a lot of key pieces and still trying to fix themselves. They're going to need to do it sooner than later. If Boise State wants to win this game, that secondary is going to have to step up. But a big way of taking pressure off of that secondary is by bringing the blitz. It's the same lessons that we learned last year, somehow forgot in game 1 until the end of the game. Boise State cannot wait that long to make the correct decisions and to learn the lessons coming into this Oregon matchup. Key number 2, again, another simple one. Don't let Oregon change you. Now, of course, every single coach is going to scheme to the strength and weaknesses of what the opponent brings to the table. But when you have a team like Boise State, the offensive system that's set up where it is so built around the run. The keys, the power, the strength of this offense is the run game. Ashton Jeanty, Sire Gaines coming. I mean, what a performance he had last week. The offensive line, that is Boise State's strength. You want to be able to utilize that passing game. It's going to have to be utilized, and it's going to be an important part of this game. But you cannot let this become another Washington-type situation where you come in and before they've even proven they can stop you on the ground, you're going away from it because you are trying to play this multi-level chess game where you are trying to, you know that they're going to try and stop the run, so you're going to come in with the pass and just focus on your strengths, play to your strengths, and let Oregon prove that they can come out and stop you. Oregon does have a good run defense. They were able to hold Idaho, again, FCS opponent, but Idaho to less than 50 yards rushing, 49 overall. But for Boise State, the strength of this team is the running game. You cannot let this be a UCLA second half situation, or like we said, Washington, where you go away from the run before you even have to. Boise State's got to come in this one and prove that Oregon can stop Ashton Jeanty and this run-focused attack. And key number 3 is make the right play, not the big play. There is a lot of pressure coming into this game for Boise State to capitalize on each and every single drive. You know what Oregon's offense is capable of, even if they didn't necessarily achieve that versus Idaho. You know what they are capable of, and if they start demonstrating that early on versus a Boise State secondary that's got a lot of question marks, and they start scoring on drive after drive, you are going to start to feel the need to go out and make that big one-shot, one-strike play, go out and force the ball into a situation where it doesn't need to be put, versus having the long, smoothly executed drive that ends in a score, whether it gets, even if it doesn't get there on the first couple of plays. Boise State's got to come into this one, and it goes back to key number 2, not letting Oregon change who you are. In the passing game for Boise State, it also applies to that as well. No matter what Oregon is doing, you have to go out and do what you know is going to be successful. Keeping the ball out of harm's way, making the smart decision, which again is Maddox Madsen's strength. It's his quick reads and it's his quick decision making. The coaches talking about how he's almost a savant in his quick decision making, that it separates him so much from the other quarterbacks in that competition, was his ability to make the quick and the right reads. And we saw a lot of that versus Georgia Southern. He's going to need to come into this and do that versus Oregon as well if Boise State's going to want to be successful. He's going to need to throw a couple of long bombs as well. I'm not saying that that's not going to be part of the game plan, and if it's open and it's available, the big play might be the right play. But for Maddox Madsen, he's got to be looking to make that smart, quick play. If that's a dump off to Ashton Jeanty versus trying to force a ball to Camper on the sideline, do the quick, short, easy play that will get you 5 yards and then come back the next down, live to play another down, and keep yourself ahead of the chain. So, and then, this doesn't just go to the passing game as well. I mean, this goes to the coaching overall. Couple of very questionable fourth down decisions last game where the data apparently said that you should go for it. Look at the situation. Make the right play, not the big play. A big fourth down conversion would have been huge, but is it necessary? Is it the right play in that situation? I don't care what the data says, and I think we see that from a lot of young coaches is a very much of an emphasis on the data. What you should be caring about, however, is the situation of the game. What is the momentum dictating? Where are you on your field? What has the other team been doing that maybe if you do, what are the consequences of not converting this? Thinking through and getting the right play versus, again, the big play is going to pay dividends for Boise State being able to come in and win this matchup. So 3 keys for Boise State: bring the blitz, don't let Oregon change who you are or change you, and then key number 3, make the right play, not necessarily the big play. All right, so summary overall for Boise State in this game. Looking at Oregon, you have to ask the question, was Oregon holding back? 24-14 from the number 3 team in the nation versus an FCS opponent is not what you expect. And when you look at Oregon's schedule, they open up Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State, UCLA, and then Michigan State and Ohio State. So those first 3 games, FCS team, Group of 5 team that didn't do great overall, 8 wins last year, won the Mountain West Championship game, but if you're just looking at the record overall, brand new head coach coming into this one, there's a lot of question marks from that program. And then Oregon State, who loses almost their entire team to the transfer portal, you may have looked at that opening series of games and thought, you can coast through this. We can just kind of maybe disguise the playbook a little bit. We don't really have to focus. We can get through those 3 games with, minimal effort, and then we can look forward to UCLA maybe being a challenger, but maybe we can even coast through that one before we then get into the meat of the Big Ten there, Michigan State and Ohio State. And so for Oregon, I know a lot of teams, they don't look ahead. When you talk to coaches, when you talk to players, they don't say that they're looking ahead. They're focused on that week 1 matchup. Oregon's not that type of team. Oregon's not like the other teams in college football. They don't have that same culture. This is a team that's been bought and paid for. This is a team that is reliant on the money. The money is what drives this program. And of course, college football has become all about the money, but especially here in Oregon. They talked about a lot in the national media when you look at recruits flipping from Oregon to other programs, even though Oregon should be the number 1 team, and as far as recruiting goes, of every single program every single year because they have the money, but they don't have the culture. They don't have the culture that focuses on that blue-collar type work ethic like Boise State does, that chip on their shoulder coming in and focusing on every single matchup. They are the type of team, if there is a team in college football that would get a big head and overlook an opponent because they don't think that they're worthy, that they think that they're somehow on a different plane of existence than them and they're unbeatable, if there's a single team in college football that would think that way, it is Oregon. And I think that they did. I think that they looked at Idaho, they just assumed a win, barely game planned for them at all. And it would have been a little tougher to game plan for Idaho because they didn't have their starting quarterback from last season, but I don't think they did much game planning overall. It looked ahead and maybe were looking forward to the Boise game, but I don't even know if they were looking forward to that. I think they looked through the first 3 games, did a little bit of emphasis on Oregon State because it's a rivalry, and jumped right to UCLA. That's how I think Oregon prepared for this season. I could be wrong, but that week 1 performance indicates that I'm not. So, were they holding back? Were they overlooking? I think they definitely were. They were able to win that game. They had to pull out more stops to win it than they thought they did, and they were able to get through it. And now they're not going to be overlooking Boise State because they just almost lost an FCS program, and they're coming up against a team that has a running back that just went for 6 touchdowns. So they're going to be ready to play Boise State. However, or they're going to be attempting to be ready to play Boise State. However, the question is it too late? If you were overlooking them all offseason, you were already jumping ahead in your perspective. I know the fans for Oregon definitely were. And now again, fans are going to do what fans are going to do. They're always going to overlook teams. That's just kind of part of being a fan is you underplay your opponents and you look ahead to what you consider to be the most fun matchup to watch. So it's not necessarily reflective of what the coaching staff and the players are doing. However, again, indications from that first game is that they were overlooking Boise State, or Idaho at least, probably Boise State as well. And now they're going to be refocusing with a fine-tooth comb to come in and be prepared for Boise State. But is it too late to refocus and shift and actually get prepared when you're only giving yourself now a week to do it versus you should have been doing it the entire offseason? I think there's a strong potential for that. Boise State and Oregon both beat up coming into this one. I thought that this was going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for Boise State. They have to play a Group of 5 team that I know a lot of Boise State fans were expecting to come in and blow them out of the water. I was not. I was calling for about, I think, a 13-point win is what I was calling for. 37-23 is what I was calling for in that game for Boise State. So I was expecting that, or so that's 14 points. But I was expecting a win for Boise, but a close one where they would have to play their starters and play to win all the way throughout. Now, of course, Boise State defense was not as good as I thought that they could be, and they ended up getting completely blown out in that one. And Oregon and Georgia Southern was able to put up a lot more points overall than we were expecting. But again, the overall idea that this was going to be tough was correct. For Oregon versus Idaho, I, like everybody else, was expecting a 70-plus point win. Obviously, not an Oregon fan by any means, but even just as an outsider looking at that, I was expecting a 70-plus point win. So, get you resting your starters maybe by the second quarter, at least by the late in the third, fourth quarter, starters coming out. And I thought, man, this is going to be tough because Boise's going to have to give everything to beat Georgia Southern. And Idaho is not going to put up any real threat to Oregon, and they're going to come in rested. Well, they're not. Now both teams are coming in a much more even level. And you could argue that Oregon had to fight maybe even a little harder in their game to win that matchup. And so the teams are coming in at the same level of resistance from week one that they had to work through. And then you also look at the fact that Oregon versus Boise State, Oregon playing an FCS team, Boise State playing an FBS team, who I think anybody would say is better than Idaho. Boise State put up a lot more yards, 651 yards overall versus Oregon's 487. Excuse me 1 minute. 380 yards passing for Oregon versus 280 yards passing for Boise State. And then the big difference, obviously, 107 yards rushing versus FCS team. For Boise State, 371 yards rushing versus an FBS opponent. So if you look at what both teams did, you got to say, well, Boise State, their offense looked better than Oregon's. Now, again, Oregon holding things back, Boise State playing with their full offense cards, maybe. But overall, things start to stack in favor of Boise State when you look at what the two teams did in their week one matchups. However, this is still a much better Oregon team than it is a Boise State team. If you look at these rosters head to head, this is clearly a far superior roster for Oregon in most areas. Not at running back, not at kicker, not at punter, but in most other areas, it's a far superior Oregon team than Boise State. And if Oregon is firing on all cylinders and fully prepared, which I think they now will be, they become a much different opponent than we saw versus week one versus Idaho. I actually think that almost losing that game to Idaho was the worst thing that could happen to Boise State, because now Oregon, they have got something to prove coming into this game. They are going to drop in the rankings. They're going to feel that. They're going to have bulletin board material, not necessarily from Boise State, but from the national media. They're going to be providing the bulletin board material asking, is this Oregon team overhyped? They're going to have all those questions. They are going to be coming into this Boise State game wanting to prove something to their fan bases, to themselves, and to the nation. Obviously, Boise State wants to as well, but Oregon's going to be very, very motivated. It's going to be a home crowd that's antsy and angry and wants them to crush Boise State. And this is going to be an Oregon team that's going to be fully 100% focused on giving their best performance in this matchup. They are going to hold nothing back, and it is going to be the best hand that Oregon can possibly deal to Boise State in this matchup. I expect a completely different outing than what they did versus Idaho. And then, of course, you have that stain on their record of the 3-0. They were already somewhat motivated to get that off, and now they're going to be even more motivated to prove that they can beat the state of Idaho when an FCS team almost beat them as well. So this is going to be a very, very, very motivated Boise State team. Then, of course, you have Dillon Gabriel. When you look at a quarterback that is the perfect nightmare fuel for a Boise State defense, it's Dillon Gabriel. I mean, there's a couple of quarterbacks out there as well, but he's one of the most challenging for this Boise State defense. If we were facing purely a pocket passing guy who was an only had his arm, maybe we could game plan to that. If we were focusing on a guy who was all legs, okay, we could maybe game plan to that. But when you have Dillon Gabriel, who both of his strengths are paired perfectly versus Boise State's weaknesses that extend back to last season, an inability to stop the passing attack, especially on third and longs. Boise State gave up an egregious amount of third down completions, 12 of 19 on third downs, most of those third and longs. His arm is going to hurt Boise State, and his legs are going to, if he uses them. He didn't versus Idaho, but I assume that there are going to be weaknesses to exploit versus Boise State. We weren't able to stop French, and I don't think we're going to be able to stop Gabriel. The arms and the legs of Dillon Gabriel are the most dangerous thing that Oregon has to present versus a Boise State secondary and defense overall that is tuned weakness-wise perfectly versus this Oregon program. And so for Boise State, they have a lot of things going against them. They have a lot of things in their favor. You got Ashton Jeanty. You got a passing game that I think showed some sparks and is capable of more. And I think we may see more in this game. A better performance passing game-wise. Specialist advantage when it comes down to punting. Only the one punt last week. Boise State's definitely going to be punting more in this one. And when they do, the field advantage is definitely going to be to Boise State. Their punter is incredible. Oregon's got no slouch at punter either, but Boise State's got the best punter in the nation. That's not just a fan homer take. That is statistically led the nation in punting yards last season. He's going to be better this year coming into his junior season. And they have the best kicker in the country as well. He's on track to eclipse the kicking record for college football overall this season. He eclipsed points total for the Mountain West. He's now the leading point scorer in Mountain West history. So specialist advantage, running back advantage, offensive coordinator advantage. If anybody can beat this Oregon team, it's Dirk Cutter. He could do it. The most experienced offensive coordinator in the game right now, besides maybe Chip Kelly. When you talk about an offensive coordinator that's been around the game for as long as he has NFL head coaching experience as not any other teams. Again, besides Chip Kelly, there's not any other coordinators out there who can say that at the offensive coordinator level. So Boise State has pros coming in this game. Every team does. And Oregon has proven that they're vulnerable, that Boise State could win this game. And so when I was coming into this game preseason, I was saying, of course, anybody could beat anybody, but the odds of Boise State winning this one are extremely low. I think that it would take a miracle for Boise State to win this game. I don't think that it would take a miracle to win this matchup. Really, and we've already gone through our keys to the game, and the keys to the game are the focus items for the team, what they need to be doing to win. But the three things for Boise State to win this game is secondary perform well, stop the running game, and a solid passing performance. Now, again, those are just kind of overall broad ideas versus specifics. The specifics are what I put into the keys of the game. But those three things, the secondary performing well, stopping Dillon Gabriel's running, and Boise State's passing game, if those three things come together for them, they can, and Ashton Jeanty is able to step up and have the performance that, not necessarily the performance we saw versus Georgia Southern, but a strong performance. Boise State can win this game. The vulnerabilities are there. Oregon's offensive line is porous. There's opportunity there. Boise State's running game and their offensive line are incredibly strong. There's opportunity there. If the secondary can perform better than last week, can make a 40% increase in output than what they did last week, we can win this game. I just don't see all those things coming together. I see us maybe having a stronger passing game. I see us maybe stopping the running game for Dillon Gabriel, but I don't see us combining all three together, and we would need all three together to win this game, and maybe also some mistakes by Oregon. And this is going to be a primed up best case Oregon that they are presenting us for this matchup on Saturday. So my score prediction is going to be Boise State 28, Oregon 49, somewhat of a similar score line to what we saw versus Washington there. It could get a lot worse on the defensive side there. The 49 points is kind of a me being optimistic. I think that Oregon could really push that number up a lot. Now, if Boise State can elongate drives, slow this game down, keep the score closer, they can have a chance in this one. And that's, again, why you can't let Oregon change who you are. You've got to stay in the running game and that short, quick passing game, which is your point of emphasis and what makes you good. But this is not going to be the Oregon team that almost lost to Idaho. This is an Oregon team that started off the season top 5, They may not be top 5 when they play Boise State, but I think they are going to prove in this matchup that they deserved to be top 5 to start the season. So this is a very, very tough task. Again, Idaho did Boise no favors by almost beating this Oregon team. Massive wake-up call for Oregon, and they're going to be ready to come and face Boise State. I unfortunately am predicting that Oregon, they're still way behind, but they're going to get that first win in the series to get them to 1-3. Boise State still a heavy lead. If Oregon wants to chip away at that, they're going to have to schedule some more games potentially. But I am predicting a loss for Boise State, unfortunately. My fan side of me, the blue that I'm wearing, doesn't want me to say that. It's trying to strangle it in my throat and choke me out with dryness before I can even get it out. But the analytics side of me has got to say this is going to be a good Oregon team. And it's going to be one of the better sides that they show the entire season coming into this matchup because of what happened in week 1. And it's a Boise State game that week 1 did not give me confidence in this team's ability to go out and beat Oregon, not defensively. Offensively, loved what I saw. Defensively, I just don't think that this is a team that can go out and beat this Oregon program with a high level of motivation coming into this in front of their own home crowd. So I'm going to be rooting against myself all the way through. I hope when I come to the review video that I've been able to say in the past, I'm not always right on this. So I would love to be able to come to the review video and say, I was wrong. Shout out to whoever you were that predicted the right score prediction. I want to be able to do that. I really, really hope that I'm completely off base on this and that Boise State secondary shows massive improvements, a completely different defense than what we saw versus Georgia Southern, that Ashton Jeanty has another career performance, 300 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns. Like, I want to see all of that. The odds of all of that coming together perfectly for Boise State are lower in this one than what would give me the ability to predict a win. So, unfortunately, going to predict a loss for Boise State, but I still think that it'll be a good game. I think that Boise State can make it a good game through at least 3/4 of this one. Keep it, lower than some people out there are predicting. Obviously, I'm above the point spread with my score prediction. I think they're totally capable of keeping this within a 3-score game. I think they're capable of winning this game. But, again, it's the big but at the end of the day. I am predicting a loss for Boise State, unfortunately, in this one. So thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. Again, hard to ask for a like and subscribe after predicting a loss, but I want to hear your own thoughts on this matchup. Let me know how I'm wrong. I want you to convince me that I'm wrong, that Boise State's going to win this game. I want that. So get in the comments below. Agree with me if you got to agree with me, but have that discussion. Give me your thoughts. Give me your disagreements. I want to have that discussion. Again, if you haven't put out a score prediction, it's too late now because you've already heard mine, I guess. But if you put it out, I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know when you put it out, I guess. But I want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. So again, thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Just past 1,900 subscribers. So season goal was 2,000 by the end of the year. I'm only 100 away now. It's been a great outpouring of support. My game preview last week and my game review were both the most watched ever on the channel for both of those categories. So thank you so much, Bronco Nation, for all the support so far. And I'm excited to see what ends up happening in this game and the rest of the season. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. And as always, win or lose, no matter what I'm predicting, go Big Blue!